Resuming debate. The honourable member for Mission-Mascot Fraser Canyon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. After 9 years of this Prime Minister, life is unaffordable. With energy bills through the roof, Canadians are struggling to afford to heat their homes and keep their lights on. Not only has the carbon tax driven up the cost of energy, but this government has launched a war on Canada's natural resources and energy sectors. Bill C-69, which was deemed largely unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of Canada last October, created burdensome red tape, drastically increased approval times, and drove away resource exploration and extraction projects. Now the Liberals seek to revive parts of that unconstitutional bill through this attack on both traditional and renewable offshore energy projects in Atlantic Canada. Bill C-49 will drive away investment through more uncertainty, red tape, and longer timelines. In 2022, the Environment Minister reluctantly approved the Bay du Nord offshore oil project, calling it one of the most difficult decisions the government had ever made. This project will create more than 13,000 jobs, 8,900 in Newfoundland and Labrador, 2,200 in Ontario, 900 in Quebec, and 700 in Alberta. It will also add about $97 billion and change to our national GDP. But thanks to this government's reckless deficit spending, cost of increase, and burdensome red tape has created uncertainty. Thanks to these factors, the project was delayed by 3 years, and it's still unclear whether the project will ever be completed at all. In Nova Scotia, a private company was set to generate electricity from the massive tides in the Bay of Fundy. However, the project was eventually cancelled due to the mountainous red tape. That company shut down its operations in Canada entirely, costing jobs for workers and affordable renewable energy for Nova Scotians. Over the last couple of years, multiple countries have pleaded for Canada to provide them LNG to help end their reliance on Russian gas. What did this Prime Minister say to those countries? He told them that there was no business case for Canada to export LNG from our east coast. Germany went on to sign an LNG deal with Qatar and built a massive receiving port in just a matter of months. What could have been powerful paychecks for Atlantic Canadians turned into more dollars for dictators. That is shameful, Madam Speaker. And of course, as a British Columbian, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, which Kinder Morgan at the beginning was prepared to complete on its own without taxpayer funding. After this government made the project unfeasible, Kinder Morgan pulled out and the government bought the pipeline. From there, costs exploded and taxpayers have now spent more than $30 billion on a project that was estimated to cost just $7 billion only a few years ago. This is the NDP Liberal government's record on energy and resource projects. Delay, drive up costs, and eventually drive projects away. I've talked a lot about the woeful lack of productivity in Canada's economy recently because it is truly an emergency. Even the Bank of Canada says that. Canada produces just 79% of what the United States does per hour. That ranks us behind all of our G7 peers, maybe save for Italy right now. Adjusted for inflation, Canada's GDP per capita now sits lower than it did in 2014. Meanwhile, businesses are closing at an alarming rate, and the data doesn't even capture the full story for small businesses. The most recent statistics from the Superintendent of Bankruptcy showed a 66.2% year-over-year increase in business insolvencies for the year ending March 31st, 2024. A recent article in the Globe and Mail highlighted that many small business insolvencies are not even captured under business insolvencies, as many small business owners have to take personal liability on leases and loans. When they go bankrupt, it's considered a consumer bankruptcy, of which Canada saw 33,885 in the first quarter of 2024, an increase of 14% year over year during the same period. Driving away investment and development of energy and resource projects will only make things worse. In a time when businesses are struggling and Canadians can't afford to pay their bills because their paychecks don't go far enough, this government is chugging ahead with another attack on energy, jobs, economic growth, and even the Constitution. Section 19 of Bill C-49 would open the door to more red tape and lengthy delays. It would shift decision-making powers on license approvals to the federal and provincial ministers while tripling the amount of time that decision can take. Section 28 would give the federal minister, with the approval of the provincial minister, the power to outright ban drilling in certain areas and even halt projects that are already approved and in progress. If this bill were to pass with Section 28 as written, it could put an end to offshore petroleum drilling in Atlantic Canada, killing good-paying jobs for workers, and further strengthening Eastern Canada's dependence on foreign oil imports from dictatorships like Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Section 61 and 62 brings the unconstitutional Bill C-69 into the review process, allowing the minister to attach any conditions they see fit to approval. I would be remiss if I didn't mention, back in 2016, I was a political staffer, and I went over this bill at the Environment Committee. At the time, it was very clear that the intention of the government with this legislation was to give ministers unilateral power. It was to give the government more control over the private sector. It was to give the government the ability to halt projects through delay tactics. We've seen it now, and we're living it now, and the last thing we need to do is to include those measures in this legislation. We've seen how this government treats resource projects in this country. Sections 61 and 62 will invariably be abused by this government to attach so many strings to approvals that projects will indeed become unfeasible, as we've witnessed. Canadians simply can't afford any more of this government and its anti-energy, anti-job, and anti-economic growth policies. They have shown time and time again that they are dead set on killing Canada's natural resource sector. If the Environment Minister had his way, not a single resource would ever be extracted in this country again. He would take away your right to have a gasoline car as well. While this government is focused on killing jobs and increasing our dependence on foreign sources of oil, Conservatives are focused on creating powerful paychecks for Canadians and getting Canada's bountiful resources to market so that our people can prosper. I will be joining my Conservative colleagues in voting against this NDP Liberal attack on Canada's resource industries. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable for Avalon.
I thank the member for his speech, and I will say from the onset, because he mentioned the oil industry, I have family members that work in the oil industry in Newfoundland as well, so I support the oil industry wholeheartedly. But one question I have for him is, he mentioned the powerful paychecks. Could you please give them, this House, your definition of a powerful paycheck?
Member knows that he's to address questions and comments through the chair and not directly to the member. The honourable member for Mission Matsky Fraser Canyon.
Well, I'd like to thank my colleague from Newfoundland for that answer. What does a powerful paycheck mean? It means that the money you earn, that more of the money you earn stays in your pocket and not in the hands of Ottawa. There's not a single Canadian who doesn't agree with that, and that's what the Conservatives are set on doing by winning the next federal election.
And comments. The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Thank you. Well, that was a hilarious way to spend my morning in the rabbit hole world of the Conservatives, who have spent weeks trying to shut down a bill about creating jobs in Newfoundland, Labrador, and Nova Scotia, who don't want any clean energy jobs offshore, even though the whole world is moving for clean energy jobs. And the member maybe he doesn't understand the word the Atlantic Accord. If he knew anything about the Atlantic Accord, he'd know about his leader trying to attack the Atlantic Accord and how Bill Casey had to stand up and leave the Conservative. Well, Bill Casey was a dignified Conservative. Of course he left them. But here we see these guys once again attacking Newfoundland, attacking Labrador, attacking Nova Scotia, attacking the Atlantic Accord, all so they can shut down energy jobs. And they got the gall to come in here and say, we're going to defend energy jobs. Like heck they are.
The honourable member for Mission Matsky Fraser Canyon.
Madam Speaker, my ears are burning with nonsense. Let me recount a story from British Columbia. One of the first decisions of the NDP Liberal government was to approve LNG in Canada. Why did they rush to approve LNG off the coast of British Columbia? Because it wouldn't be subject to the constitutional discrepancies in the bill before us today. Bill C-69 effectively shut down resource exploration, development, and exportation in Canada. That's why the NDP Liberal government did not include the carbon tax when they approved that bill. That is why they did not subject the largest private sector investment to their unconstitutional laws. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Order. On both sides of the House, there are people having discussions or heckling, and I think that it's really inappropriate. I would ask members to please wait until it's the proper time to do that. A point of order, the honourable for Timmins James Bay.
That's what I was concerned is because it's impossible to have nonsense in your ears. Nonsense comes out of your mouth.
It's not a point of order, and I do want to remind members, again, it was on both sides of the House, even prior to, even while the honourable member was asking the question. So I would just ask members to please be respectful and to please allow for the questions and answers to be asked without disruption. Questions and comments? The honourable for South Shore, St. Margaret's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is C-49, and what C-49 does that this member very well articulated is brings in the no capital bill, C-69, into offshore energy in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. And just to give you an example, every summer, as the member for Avalon would know, the Newfoundland and Labrador Offshore Petroleum Board puts out a call for exploratory licenses, and every summer they get applications. This past summer, 4 weeks after this bill was tabled in the House, you know how many applications Newfoundland got? 0, because of the provisions in this bill already on the IAA that is driving capital now into the Gulf of Mexico, where all of those capital investment went. So I'd like this member to tell us a little bit about the experience he's had with how the IAA elements, the environmental review elements of C-69, which are now in this bill, have shut down jobs in his part of the world.
The honourable member for Mission Matsky Fraser has about a minute to respond.
Well, I'd like to thank my honourable colleague from St. Margaret's, South Shore. When Bill C-69 was before Parliament a few parliaments ago, I'll give the Canadian Mining Association came out very strongly in favour of the bill. I questioned the Canadian Mining Association in advance of the 2019 election as to why they would support this legislation. They have since rescinded their support for the approach taken by the NDP Liberal government. And they did that primarily because what the unconstitutional Bill C-69 does, and by extension its provisions in Bill C-49, is provide opportunities for the minister to make unilateral decisions that create a level of uncertainty that most Canadian capital and most foreign capital that wants to invest in Canada are not willing to take a risk on. So what we need to do, and what this bill has shown us, is that we need to provide certainty. We do need to have strong environmental reviews, but that needs to be coupled with a degree of certainty to allow investment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.